I'm introducing myself. I'm a geologist working in second government. Recently posted to work in the disaster management department. So, with your presentation, what I observed is you are talking the relation of the landslide and climate change scenario. For me also, I'm a geologist, and then, even I talk of the eccentricity and the landslide and the climate change doesn't have the proper relation actually for me. And you talked of the dams and landslides events, and there's a crucial talk these days is a geopolitical terms these days. So there's also an issue. So and regarding the dam situation, so it should be highlighting the glacial lake situation, at least in Sikkim and our Himalaya situation. So you can highlight on these terms. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. I mean, there's a lot to discuss there. So first of all, you mentioned climate change, and climate change in this part of the world is real, and is undeniable. Climate change is undoubtedly happening. Actually, if you look at the maps of global temperature for the last 12 months, the picture is really scary. Actually, I mean, if you've not seen them, have a look at them, because the Arctic, the average temperature in the Arctic last month was 7 degrees centigrade higher than normal. 7 degrees centigrade. I mean, some part of the Arctic it was 11 degrees centigrade more than normal. I mean, extraordinarily warm. And actually, the amount of ice up there is declining quite fast as a consequence. But I don't think that actually the patterns that we're seeing in the Himalayas is in any way dominated by climate change. I think it is a real problem, and I think in due course it will become more of a problem. But actually, these problems are all of our own. I don't think we can blame the weather. These are things that we as humans are doing, and in particular, it is poor management of slopes. It is poor management of drainage. That is the real problem. If we want to reduce the incidence of landslides, if we want to reduce the loss of life, actually the two most important things we could do is to do our engineering properly and do our drainage properly. And actually the most effective would be to do our drainage properly. Landslides are really about water, and managing water properly would be a huge step. So it's very easy for us to get terribly worried about climate change, and we should. But actually we can reduce this, I think, by managing water properly and by doing engineering properly. And we have the capability to do this. This is the really frustrating thing. We know how to do this. We just don't do it. So that is, I think, is the worst stuff. Would be made by. So it is. I think you're absolutely right. This is a cultural, political, social problem. And I suppose in my I would just like us to say, right, we're going to do this.
Myself, Kausika, assistant professor in geology. So I have a question. You have go to please your slide of East Asia. The two zonation in the subduction zone and Himalayan thrust zone. So in that zone you have divided the two zones on the basis of typhoon and on the basis of monsoon. So is there any pattern of change of landslide due to that you have changed those two zones?
Okay, that's actually an excellent question. So I mean, if you take say the last 5 years. What you see is that, in fact, the number of typhoons in the Pacific has been historically low. I mean, actually extraordinarily low. And the consequence actually is that in China, the number of rainfall-triggered landslides has also been surprisingly low. And in China, they are saying, this is because we now have control of the situation. don't actually believe that. I think it is just that the occurrence of typhoons has been low. In 2015, the number of typhoons was quite high again, but actually through luck or maybe El Nino, these typhoons didn't really make it ashore. So the pattern is dominated by what the typhoons are doing at the time. Sooner or later, we're going to get a year where we have lots of typhoons that come ashore in China, and I think under those circumstances, we will see many more landslides. And similarly, if you plot out landslides occurring in South Asia, year by year, you can see you can see very closely the relationship between the strength of the monsoon and the number of landslides occurring. So when the monsoon is very intense, we see more landslides, and when the monsoon is weak, we see fewer. And the pattern varies year on year. So actually, if we could get to a situation in which we could forecast reliably what the monsoon is going to do a few months ahead, then we would start to be able to get a handle on what is the likely landslide impact. That would be quite a good thing to do, but it actually requires that we improve the quality of our long-range weather forecasting. But nonetheless, it would be a
Is there any pattern of change of landslide in the El Nino year?
change of pattern in what way?
El Nino year?
In the hill area?
No, El Nino.
El Nino year.
El Nino.
Oh, El Nino. It's a really good question. The answer is I don't know, actually. And the reason I don't know is that there was a very strong El Nino in 1997, 1998. And that was before we started to collect this data. And then there was this long period where we were mostly in La Nina conditions, and the El Nino conditions were very weak. And actually we did see increase in landslides in El Nino years globally, but mostly in South America. Now, we are just 2/3 of the way through a very big El Nino. And so we had anticipated that we would see a big uptick in landslides this year, or in the last 12 months, and we have not. Okay, so this is a surprise. Maybe it is because the El Nino is not finished yet, but actually the control that we thought that El Nino would be having on this doesn't seem to be there. In particular, we've done very detailed work for South America. And South America, we thought that the landslide pattern was completely dominated by El Nino, but maybe not. So at my university, UEA, we have the biggest group of academics that contribute to IPCC of any university in the world. So one of the 3 global temperature data sets that we use to define global warming is the so-called HAD-CRU data set, and that is the UEN data set. So my team manage one of the 3 global temperature data sets. So we have a group of experts who are the best in the world for climate change. It's one of the reasons that I'm there, actually. What they say is, what you have to remember is that although the raw numbers about this El Nino are that it was slightly bigger than 1997. Actually, from 1997 to now, the global temperature, and in particular the amount of heat in the ocean, has risen. So actually the size of the El Nino above the background is not as big as it was in 1997. So actually, although it looks like a big El Nino, in reality it wasn't as big as it appears. And this may be the reason why the occurrence wasn't as big as it looks. But ask me in a year and I'll give you a proper answer.
Thank you.
I'm also a geologist and my name is Kostov. First of all, I must appreciate one thing. This is a landslide physics. It's not landslide management, it's a physics, and it's a really complicated subject. And one thing is, really appreciate another thing, you correlated with the road maps. Because basically road maps, whenever we construct road, we destabilize the hill slopes. But one thing I want to ask that, is there any correlation between the use of a road, or rather how much a road is used or for the cyclic loading with the prone, with its affinity towards the landslide?
I don't believe so. although there is more research. And certainly, you know, there's been suggestions that when a heavy vehicle is passing by, that it may destabilise the slope above. We haven't looked at that problem, okay, but we have looked at something that is very similar, which is on coastal cliffs, where you have waves hitting the bottom of the coastal cliffs, and the energy that is transferred from the wave is much bigger than the energy that comes from a truck, okay? And let me explain. So we looked at seismometers, okay, and monitored the energy arriving at the cliff, how much the cliff is vibrating. And we monitored rockfalls as a result, and we see no correlation. Okay? No correlation at all. So the wave impacts do not cause rockfalls in that setting. Now, the amount of energy that a wave puts into a cliff is much, much greater than the amount of energy that a heavy vehicle puts into a slope. So, although it has not been examined properly, and it is an interesting hypothesis, my suspicion is it is not the problem of traffic. But on the other hand, if you have traffic at the bottom of the cliff when a rockfall happens, it's much more likely that someone's going to get killed. So there is a correlation from that perspective. Where there may be something interesting is where the landslide is below the road. And so it is the additional weight of the truck. So if you have 4 60-ton trucks going across the same section at once, that additional load may be significant, especially when the ground is wet. But in terms of vibration, I have not seen any evidence that this is a significant effect, and in fact the data that we have would suggest that it isn't. But hey, let's go and look, because it will be a really interesting research.
Basically, one thing is that, I don't know where you have studied these things, the rock type also is a crucial factor here, on how they will behave on the cyclic plane. And if I just ask you another question, you are always focusing on the large dam. Why ignoring the small dams? Because whenever you are building a water body, you are putting a pressure of water, or particularly in the river streams, you are also accommodating extra sediments. So they also change the situation of the loading in a particular small region. So why only focus on the large dam? Why not consider the small dams also?
Well, it would be great, unfortunately, and I agree. It would be a really interesting study. Unfortunately, I have only so much time. So, why not study small dams? Well, yeah, let's study small dams, because I think it would be really interesting. But I can only do so much. Your observation that it may be significant is absolutely correct. And for me, this is, there is a journal, medicine, called the British Medical Journal, and in that journal, you are not allowed to say this requires further research. That is a banned phrase. Okay, so you should always avoid saying this requires further research, but it does.
Thank you.
Just to inform the discussion, some of the parameters which you correlated globally, we had studied some of those, including like the rainfall pattern over the year, and like the major disaster occurrences out here. We have a July peak in some years, and then in that case it's a bimodal. There's a July peak, then there's a slump in August, then again it picks up. Or otherwise we have a September peak, and the September peak is usually cyclonic. That time we had got whatever storm tracks were available. Most cyclones developing over the bay, which actually affect this region, which develop over the Bay of Bengal, tend to veer either to the east over Bangladesh, or they veer to the west to Orissa, or in extreme circumstance to Andhra Pradesh. But once in a while we get a cyclone like Ayla, or like the cyclone that hit the region in 1968, which comes in straight. It doesn't veer to the east or to the west, and then it gets trapped by this mountain cauldron which is formed by the Sikkim Himalaya. Because there's high mountains on all sides, and there's a low elevation area. Then all the rain actually has to spend itself here, and all the rain drains out to this one river, the Tista. So we saw that happening in 1968. It was seen before in 1899, which was worse than 1968, not in terms of deaths, but in terms of the impact. And the earthquake correlation, there is a line in the Jules Dash Gazetteer for the Island District in 1945, which mentioned that the Paglachora landslide, which is a problem landslide right now, was stable until the 1934 Bihar earthquake. After there actually a dormant landslide which the entire cone sits in that area, and the highway crosses the landslide twice. So after 1934 this became unstable, and then what has happened is the engineering means that they used to stabilize the road actually adds to top load. So you putting more concrete, more boulders and all, and you're weighting it out. So at the same time there's a lot of stop-start traffic running across it. So right now that route is shut. But it is one thing, so we are expecting that after this Nepal earthquake or the 2011 earthquake, such destabilization will have probably appeared.
Interesting.
So I'm Emil Aperti from Rotary Club of Kalimpong. So thank you very much for the nice presentation. And I have a question that we are living in a zone, a region, the Kalimpong dome, that is directly standing on the Tista River. And just below the Kalimpong dam, this region, this dome, a big dam is being constructed, and it is already on. So it is 15 meter high. So huge impoundment of water. There is a national highway and other factors like slope angle, the precipitation rainfall pattern, and geology, road network, and the earthquake zone. This is the earthquake zone, and all these factors indicating that we are living in a dangerous zone. So can we predict this thing beforehand? I have to say the life of the
So that's my prediction. Is difficult. So I suppose actually prediction is a slightly difficult term. Okay, and different people use it in different ways. So that's just the first thing to say. So sometimes people say, can we predict that if we build a dam here, this slope will become unstable? And we can, with proper investigation, we can make a good forecast of behaviour, and we'll be right quite often. But it does require very detailed investigation to be able to do it. So you can't just take a satellite data set, SRTM topography data set and a general geology map and a vegetation map and say, well, the river level is going to be this, and therefore this slope is going to be unstable and this one is not. So if you do a very detailed investigation of the ground, then you can get a pretty good estimate about whether it is likely to be destabilised or not. And I sort of assume that in the planning of these big dams, that sort of investigation along the slopes on either side is a part of the project to ensure that the construction of the dam is appropriate. So that sort of work should have been done, and there should be some estimate of the likely stability. And presumably, if the dam is constructed, that means that the assumption is that the slopes will be okay. And good practice is then that there is monitoring to make sure that the slopes are behaving as the model predicted. The second element is, well, what happens if you've got a slope that you now know is moving, and you've got people living in a way or a lake at the bottom or something, and can you predict its future behaviour? So can you say, this slope is now moving, we think it is going to collapse catastrophically, and therefore we need to move people out of the way. And in certain circumstances, but they are very limited, it is possible to do that. But the number of circumstances is very small at the moment. We, I think, hope that in due course we will be able to do this much more. But at the moment, the circumstances are very, very limited. And again, you need to be able to do that. You need good data. So you need to have sensors across the landslide that are allowing you to measure the movement and understand what is causing the movement. And then from that, you can sometimes extrapolate forward into what the landslide is going to do. And Chris Kilburn and myself wrote some papers a few years ago where we looked at exactly doing that and showed that in very limited circumstances you could do that. Now, the interesting thing is that one of those circumstances in which you could do that is the Viant failure in 1963. If you take the data that they were collecting at Viant and you analyse it as we now know you can analyse it, you can predict accurately when that slope was going to collapse. So it would have been possible in that case, if you had that technique, to have evacuated the people. But we now know that afterwards. They didn't know that now, at the time that they were. So the answer is yes, but it's a very, very weak yes. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Abigail Wright from Southie College. Actually, I just wanted to know, do high-rises, okay, the tall buildings, whether they make the slopes stable or whether they make it more vulnerable to earthquakes? Because I stay in Darjeeling, right, and there are a lot of, the buildings and all, and every monsoon, we keep our fingers crossed because we just feel that the whole hillside will go down. But till now, nothing has happened. So I just wanted to know whether the buildings make the ground more stable or whether it makes it vulnerable to landslides.
It's actually really, it's a very, very interesting question, and the answer to it is, the answer is it depends, okay, and it depends actually on the foundation of the building, okay. So if you imagine you have a slope and you have a landslide on it, and the sliding surface is say 10 meters below the surface. If you construct a building on that slope, and the foundation of the building is just within the landslide body, so it doesn't go down into the stable rock below, what you have done is to add nothing to increase the stability of the landslide, okay? But you've added weight, and under those circumstances, the slope will be less stable, usually, in most cases. A bit of a generalisation, but in most cases. On the other hand, if your foundation has gone down through the landslide and into solid rock, you are now providing an additional anchor for the landslide into solid rock. And so under those circumstances, the slope will be more stable. It may not be stable because you are then relying upon those piles, that foundation, to provide all the stability of the slope, which is probably right. But you have probably increased the stability. So the key question is the foundation in relation to the depth of the sliding. And if the foundation is not as deep as the landslide, then it is very unlikely to have made it more stable. But I would say though, an interesting observation is that actually, generally speaking, tall buildings perform well in earthquakes. I mean, you probably saw the Taiwan example of 3 weeks ago, where two tall buildings didn't perform well. But actually that is really quite unusual. And you take the Christchurch earthquake, where the accelerations were short, but extremely high. The tall buildings were profoundly damaged. Damaged to the point where they all had to be dismantled. But none of the tall buildings that were properly constructed collapsed. So in other words, proper construction of tall buildings is entirely appropriate, but it is completely dependent upon the design and getting the design right. If you don't get the design right, then they will not stay. But if you do,
So, good evening, sir. I will be very much reason specific to Kalimpong region. Since I will do the road construction, so my question will be, how we have a Vista Dam all along this national highway, water is a 40 to 50 kilometers, this parallel to national highway. How rise in the Vista Dam may affect the landslidings Kalimpong sub-region? One. Second, for the last 1 to 2 months, we have seen the rise in the water level in the Vista Dam. Also, is there any correlation between the rising water level in the dam with the precipitation level at Kalimpong, which may create landslide?
Wow, that's two questions. Okay, so let's just, answer your first one. So, why is it that increasing the water level in the lake might change the stability of the slope? Actually, if you could cut a section through a slope, you would find that somewhere in the slope there is the groundwater level, and it slopes nearly parallel but not quite parallel to the ground surface. And what you will find is that if you map that out, generally speaking, the point at which the groundwater level reaches the surface will be where the river is. Okay, that is generally the rule in a mountain chain. When it rains, what will happen is that the groundwater level will go up, so it's higher than where the river meets the slope, and then of course you have more landslides, and when it's dry, it will go back down again. Again, that is a simplification, but it's a good sort of starting point working model. So if you increase the level of the lake by 50 meters, what you will do is you completely reset the groundwater level for the whole slope. You don't just set it for the bottom, but in fact the base level is changed, and so the groundwater level from nearly all of the slope will shift. It will shift most at the bottom and least at the top, but nonetheless you will see a response in the groundwater level across the whole length of the slope. So it is much more likely that you will see more landslides at the bottom than at the top, because there is a greater change. And I think you do. You probably are seeing that already. And so, yes, you would expect to see more landslides when the level of the lake comes up. And you would expect to see, in the first few periods of heavy rain after the lake has come up, you would expect to see more landslides again. And part of the assessment of the project should have been to model that behaviour and to see whether the amount of landslides you will see has been acceptable. So the very best example of this is the Three Gorges Dam in China. You probably know this dam. I've been to the dam, I've had a look at the slopes. And there they did this calculation and worked out how many landslides they would get, and they were wrong. Okay? And they had many more landslides. And so they are estimating they may need to move very many more people from the banks than they expected, because they've created more instability. So in that case, the model was wrong, but the model was done 20 years ago, so now the models are much better, so hopefully it is much more reliable. But in the Three Gorges Dam, they have 600 sites where they are monitoring the slopes, 600 individual sites where they are monitoring slopes, so that they can understand the response of the slopes to the rising water level. And so I am a visiting professor at the Three Gorges University in China, so that we can work on this data together. So it's quite an interesting problem that we are actively investigating at the moment. You then ask about whether the lake may change the weather, and again there is evidence that you do change the local precipitation pattern when you build a lake. But generally speaking, to make a really significant change, the lake has to be very, very big. And I would guess that. I mean, I'm no meteorologist. Our colleague Joanne, who is on this project, would be in a much better place to answer than I would. But my completely uneducated view would probably be that is not going to be a really significant effect. It's much more likely to be the change in groundwater level. But again, I mean, my caution here is that in the design of the dam, the stability of the slopes should have been taken into consideration. So it should not be the case that there is a surprise here. The proper protocol is that these things have been investigated, and therefore, when the dam went ahead, the assumption must be that the slopes were going to behave okay. And the monitoring that now goes on should be the thing that validates whether the behaviour is as expected. And I would be very interested to hear from you what that monitoring is showing.
I'm a geologist working in government of Sikkim. So like in global scenario, you present that number of occurring of landslide, the frequency of landslide is more in July, but number of person killing more in September.
Yeah.
What is the there is any scientific correlation between this event?
Yeah. Okay. So this is spatial. This is a spatial effect. Okay. And this is because you have two different triggers occurring simultaneously. well, actually not quite synchronize. So, you know, the global picture for people being killed by landslides is dominated by these two different weather patterns. The South Asian monsoon and the East Asian tropical cyclones. So if you have these two processes occurring simultaneously, and they both occur in the northern hemisphere summer, but they are not synchronous. Okay, so the South Asian monsoon is more intense earlier than the East Asian tropical cyclone season. So this is the key difference. So our understanding, our hypothesis maybe, is that when there is a difference in the way that the populations in the East Asian mountains and the South Asian mountains are organised. And in particular, in South Asia, you tend to see lots of landslides that kill small numbers of people. Okay. And in East Asia, you see fewer landslides that kill more people. And that may be partly topography, but it is mostly about population density. But in East Asia, in China, the population is just more dense. So a landslide of a similar size kills more people, basically, on average. And so because the East Asian tropical cyclone season peaks in September, you see a peak in the number of fatalities in September. Because the South Asian monsoon season peaks in July, you see a peak in the number of landslides in July. So it is kind of weird, but it is the effect of these two different weather systems simultaneously. It's kind of really difficult to get your head around, but that is the reason.
So for your information, during 2012, from June to September, Sikkim lost 47 lives from the landslides. This is for your information.
47.
So 47 lives.
Last
2012. These are 2012. So maybe, but we lost more lives during the earlier part of the time, but it was less during the later part of the time.
Yeah.
For your information, and
okay,
these are
that's very interesting. You know, I should say, I mean, one of the things that this did not pick up, this disaster didn't pick up, is the Uttarakhand disaster of 3 years ago. You know, and in particular, the two debris flows at Kedarnath, at the temple at Kedarnath. You know, which and as you may know, I was the first person to analyse those two events, so used satellite imagery to show that there was this. The first one was a landslide event, and the second one was effectively a burst out of a glacial lake because of the dam constructing, the glacial dam failing. And of course that event occurred very, very early in the cycle, indeed. And so that, you know, when we say that this data is not dominated by climate change, you know, it is those events where, you know, maybe we are seeing climate change, because that was really exceptional. We had this enormous plume of wet weather that came up over Uttarakhand and then and fell onto snowfall. You know, so it rained onto snow to generate enormous floods. It was a really extreme event, and those are kind of strange. And you know, there aren't enough of them to analyse at the moment, but there is something really interesting in those events.
Hello, Professor. We meet each other, isn't it? My name is Vivatra, and I'm from Department of Geography, Sikkim University. Professor, would you please highlight some of the good examples from some nation or some landslide-prone area of good mitigation measures or good preparedness measures, so that we can get some kind of enlightenment regarding this managing the landslide disaster? And the thing is that another question is that your project, the SHAMROCC project, is a great project, and we really appreciate you all guys. But regarding that, whenever we do some kind of research, and lots of project has been done in this area in Sikkim Himalaya, in the Darjeeling Himalaya, and it has been finished, and it has still remained in the books or in pieces. There's no kind of planning, and there's no kind of policy has been formulated still now here. So, according to your group, what will be your recommendation towards the authority? Because we know we need to infuse the authority if you need to manage the disaster. So,
Those are great questions. So, I'm extremely fortunate that one of the things that I do is I sit on a body for the government of Hong Kong. So Hong Kong has an organisation called GEO, which manages slopes across Hong Kong. It has a 3-person international advisory panel that meets for 1 week per year. And for the last 4 years, I have been a member of that organisation. And this is really interesting because Hong Kong has by far the most successful program to manage landslides anywhere in the world ever. So if you go back to the mid-1970s, Hong Kong was suffering about 50 deaths per year from landslides. It had a series of big disasters, including a landslide disaster called Po Shan Road, in which a slope failed in a cyclonic typhoon rainfall event, and it came down and it hit a tower block, and the tower block fell, and it then hit, and in falling it hit another tower block and brought that one down. So they had effectively 2 tower blocks collapse and very, very large numbers of fatalities. And in response to that, the Hong Kong government, which of course actually was the British government at the time, set up this organisation called GEO to manage slopes. And now, well, in the last 10 years, they have had 1 fatality. Okay, so they went from 50 to 60 per year to 1 per decade. Okay, so brilliantly successful. And I can send to you actually, they've written a paper about what was it that they did that allowed them to reduce the risk in that way. Okay, so the first thing they did was they moved people who were living in really dangerous places. Okay, so and the way they did this was not to forcibly evict them. They created a big public housing program. So they built apartments, and then they gave these apartments at very low rents to people who were living in dangerous places, and so they relocated. In most cases, they went from poor quality housing into good quality housing, happy to move, and that moved a lot of people out of the way of the landslides. And that's the first thing. Second thing is they did they set up a program to educate engineers. Okay, so make sure that every engineer who was working on a slope problem had a professional accreditation, and they set up a government body which checked designs. So if you wanted to design a slope, you had to be a chartered engineer, and the design was checked by the government, and if it was not good enough, it got sent back. And then the third thing is that they set up a program, and they mapped out every slope in Hong Kong, and then they identified the ones that were the most dangerous, and they had a program, year by year, they went back and repaired them. Okay, so they re-engineered them to make them safer. And this risk mapping exercise, so they started with the most dangerous, and then they did about 150 per year, and so they got rid of the really dangerous ones, and then the dangerous ones, and then the slightly less dangerous ones, and so they reduced the risk. And then the final thing, well, the 2 further things they did was, 1, they created a landslide warning system, which is a combination of Doppler radar and rain gauges. And so now they issue an alert about 3 hours before heavy rainfall to say there is rain coming in, and people are then able to relocate from dangerous places. You have to have Doppler radar to do that. Doppler radar is brilliant if you have it for being able to forecast rain coming. And you should think about Doppler radar for here, because it would make a big difference. And then the final thing is they run an enormous public awareness campaign. So they run education events for kids, they run seminars, they produce books, they have adverts on the TV, which is basically, when heavy rainfall comes, slopes are dangerous, keep away from them, and if you are in a dangerous place and we issue an alert, move away. And that set of things together, so relocating people most dangerous, proper engineering, mending dangerous slopes, a warning system, and public education together have taken 60 fatalities a year to 1 fatality per decade. Brilliantly successful. So that's how to do it. If you want to do it, there is a model there to do it. And That is the model now for the smoke management system in Malaysia, for example, in South Korea. They are all doing the same thing. So it's a really long answer, but it's actually really interesting to see what they do. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Professor, regarding your recommendation towards the authority, that means how your project going to influence the authority, so that we need an authority, isn't it, here to implement any kind of planning process. So after finishing a project, how it's going to benefit the locals here, especially if judging people's accountable people's here.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really good question. So, I mean, in a way, one of the things I've become very uncomfortable about is this idea that in some way a group of scientists from Europe kind of arrive here on parachutes, you know. They're on the ground for 2 days and then they go away and say, right, what we're going to do is this, and this will solve your problems. It doesn't, right? It doesn't solve problems. And so I don't think it is my place to stand here and tell you what we should be doing that's going to solve your problems. I actually think it should be exactly the opposite way around. I think you should be telling us what you need to solve your problems, and we should then be thinking about how we can work with you to make that happen. And you know, it is a case of co-production research that we do together, about thinking about the ways to make this work together, and about a kind of long-term engagement. But I honestly think that if I stand here and say, right, our project is going to be this, and the result of it will be that, none of it will work, actually. I think that we can be a small part of facilitating something that actually should be done in India. And the expertise and the skills and the knowledge and the data should be India's. And that we, you know, our role is just to provide some assistance and help, and maybe to access the money. It's important, right? To make this happen. So, you know, I mean, what would be absolutely fantastic is in 5 years' time, if I come back, and I really hope I do, and there's a group of Indian engineers and scientists saying, you know, we have done this, and we have solved a problem like this. And that maybe we played a role in helping that to happen, and you know, in bringing this in the technology in or whatever. But actually, it's a kind of joint project that we will do together, not something that would be my lesson. So, and in a way, I'm sort of encouraging you to tell us.
So, tell me one thing. In this rainfall pattern that is concentrated with a few days in the long and in this slope angle, and in this soil texture, and this jam is inception, and this network of roads, can you just hopeful to prevent the landslide here in this zone? Is it feasible?
Yeah, I think it's really important to make the point that the human race has the technology and the skills and the knowledge to massively reduce the landslide problems in Kalimpong. Okay, we can do this. All right? It isn't that we lack the knowledge or the skills or the technology to do this. We have it. Okay. The question is, can we bring it together to make it happen? And you know, to do that, you need engineering, and you need skills, and you need knowledge and data, and you need money and you know, support from government. But you know, if we can, the challenge is to do that. Actually, the technical side of this, the techniques exist. All right. Now we need to do incredible work to make it happen. But we should not think that this is a problem that is, you know, is unsolvable. You know the announcements 3 weeks ago about the discovery of gravitational waves. Did you see this? Mm-hmm. Do you know the size of the wave they are finding is 10 to the minus 21 millimeters. I mean, it's so unbelievably small, and they can detect it now. That is far harder than this. I mean, really, that is much more difficult. We can do that, but we can do this. It just takes the will to do it. I mean, I just think we've got to have a kind of we can do this, attitude.
Is that technology already is there? Knowledge is there?
Yeah, the knowledge, the general knowledge is there, but the specific knowledge from Kalimpong is not there. But the general knowledge, that this solving the landslide problem or reducing the landslide problem in Kalimpong does not require us to do anything that we have never done before. It's just bringing those techniques together and doing them here. So I don't think we should say this is a grand problem that is unsolvable. This is absolutely solvable. This is not rocket science. Actually, we can do rocket science as well now. So that phrase doesn't work anymore. But this is completely doable. I just think we should do it.
If I may interrupt now, last two questions, please.
Good evening, everyone. And first of all, sir, thank you so much for such a nice presentation and for such a nice session. So it's not a question exactly, it's just a kind of query from my side. And I just wanted to know, you explained very well the relationship between the occurrence of landslide and the major dams, and the occurrence of landslide and the earthquake. Since you're expert in the field of geology, so I just wanted to know about is there any kind of relationship between the construction of huge dam and since there we can see the huge impoundment of water, siltation, and at the same time the urbanization. All this gives some kind of surcharge to the slope. So I just wanted to know, is there any kind of relationship between the construction of all these things and seismic activities in that zone? Like the construction of dam and the relationship with the earthquake, occurrence and the frequency of earthquake?
Well, that is an enormous area of discussion at the moment. And actually, the focus of that discussion is the 2008 earthquake in China. So the interesting thing about the 2008 earthquake in China, in Sichuan province, is that the earthquake did actually initiate very close to an area with a significant number of large dams. And there was a Chinese group, a reputable group of earthquakers, who proposed that it was actually the additional load from the dam, from the reservoir, that triggered the earthquake. So the idea is that the fault was very, very close to rupture at the time. And the construction of the dam and the big lakes then was enough to change the stress condition to initiate the earthquake. Now, that as an idea is incredibly controversial. Okay, so if you talk to seismologists, lots of them will say to you, absolutely not. And lots of them will say to you, maybe. Now, if you look at the work that they've done since, this group in China, actually, if you read their analysis in isolation, it looks quite convincing. And actually, I mean, it's certainly scientifically credible that there was a relationship. But it is by no means certain. Okay, and I'm not sure that we will ever know the answer to that. I mean, we do know that elsewhere, big lakes have triggered local seismicity. But this is the first time there's been a real suggestion that there might have been a big one. So in a way, my answer to that would be, I don't think I know, that there is a group of people who say possibly, but it certainly is not the general opinion that is the case. All right. So in other words, maybe, but I mean, if I was a betting man, and I'm definitely not, I would probably just about bet on the basis that it was not, that was a fault that ruptured naturally. But nonetheless, there is a group who argue that it might be.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I guess that would be the closest I would come to an answer. I don't think there's any evidence from anywhere else that there's been a significant triggering of an earthquake from the dam. This is really the only case where there is a possibility of a significant. Human activities do change earthquakes, right? I mean, if you look at the number of earthquakes, the very small earthquakes occurring in North America, it has increased dramatically in the last few years because of fracking. But these are very small, non-damaging earthquakes. So humans do change earthquakes. But for these really big ones, Probably not, but there is a group who say maybe.
Thank you, sir.
Last question, if any.
Can I explain? No, right now this young man was talking about the reservoir-induced earthquake seismicity. The concept of reservoir-induced seismicity started from USA.
Yes.
There was a place called Rocky Mountain Arsenal, where they used to produce lots of nuclear weapons. So in the process of producing those nuclear weapons, they had lots of nuclear waste. So how to dispose of those nuclear waste? So what they did was they drilled into the earth for 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers. They injected the nuclear waste into the Rocky Mountain area where the land was geologically stable, supposedly stable. Then suddenly they started sensing earthquakes after injecting all those liquid into this. And then after that, the concept of reservoir-induced seismicity came into being. So, in the Himalayas, especially in a place like Sikkim, we have had several medium-sized dams. Dam is a dirty word anyway. So, the first dam we had in Sikkim was a very small dam. After impounding certain amount of water into the dam, in that locality we had several episodes of seismicity. Whether you scientifically correlate damming and seismicity is one thing. But there is, now in India we had a big dam called Koyna Dam in South India. After damming that area, the locality has been experiencing several earthquakes of magnitude less than 3 every day. Now in Sikkim, when in 1960s the small dam was built, we had several episodes of seismicity. Now we have another one, which is a bigger one in East District. Now in this case, there was no seismicity as such, but we have that reservoir-induced landslides. Landslide is a general term anyway. When you talk about landslide, we are talking about human beings. Like all human beings come in different sizes and shapes and temperaments. So when you talk about landslides, then we are talking like describing human beings. So how to go about treating a temperament of a human being, then you have to treat it the same way the landslides. So when you are treating as human being, you need to have psychologists, psychiatrists. So for a landslide treatment, you got to have so many specialists. So in this West Bengal area, we have the famous Pindaria and Paglajora landslides that has been blocking the National Highway 55 for the past 10 or some years. Now what I have been seeing is, I hope somebody comes up with some solution to tackle that one, because Darjeeling is a very unique, one of the most beautiful places to visit. Because of the road, now people think twice to visit. Now because of some unique geological problem in that area, the connectivity is disconnected. The only problem, the tragedy is that people have not come to a conclusion. You have to consult a geologist. What is the problem?
Yeah.
In that place, we have when to tackle the stratigraphic contacts, when a sedimentary comes into contact with the magma. So because of this problem, we have lots of instabilities in that area. I feel, we as geologists, we can contribute on lots of things, specifically for specific areas. In landslide, when you are describing landslide on a global scale, it's very generalized. For a Kalimpong, if you look from satellite, the whole land formation is in a arcuate formation. It's a circular type of. All the drainages are parallel. Why it is like this?
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I've never considered myself to be an landscape psychologist. As myself, in terms of landscape physicist, I might take my first kind of like this is on here. I mean, I'm absolutely not denying that there is reservoir-induced seismicity, as there is fracking-induced seismicity. Absolutely there is. The question is whether you get big earthquakes associated with reservoirs, which is what the question was about. And my answer is, yeah, we know reservoirs. Small, so magnitude 3, magnitude 4. Can they induce magnitude 8, which is what wave 1 was? And the answer is, we don't know. I suspect probably not, but there is a group that is possible. And it does seem to me to be a kind of very critical research question about whether that can happen. So yeah, I mean, I probably absolutely agree with you. But ultimately, you can almost put that sort of problem to one side and say, we need research and let's just get on with that. The kind of immediate problem, which is landslides that kill people in Kalimpong every summer, every monsoon. There's no excuse for us not just to get on that and fix that.
Right. Thanks to Dave for the simple way that he put a very complicated subject together and the brilliant delivery. I would request Sri P. Rai, Honorable MP, Sikkim, kindly say a few words.
Thanks, Praful. First of all, thank you all for, thanks to Save the Hills and Praful in particular for inviting me for this absolutely. I need to go back. I was watching your movements. For this very engaging presentation, and as Praful put it, put it very simply and so that you could understand it. It has, I feel it does have lots of public policy inputs which I take from here, and I must thank this interdisciplinary group for taking the time out and visiting Kalimpong. We certainly think that it is, if you can get the attention of the authorities of the government of West Bengal to move this project forward, it would be absolutely delightful. Much of us from Sikkim can, as I said, we learn from, as well as from all the other mountain states. I think one of the things that I could, immediately see is some of the simple messages that came out is essentially to, how do you really make everything as simple as possible and so that even a layman here can understand. I think those messages maybe Save the Hills can cull out of this presentation and start disseminating it right away. If that's the first step that you can take even before you move on to the next step of the project. But I've already had a detailed discussion with 4 members of the group. I think it would be useful to catch up and see how we can take this forward. Understandably, it would be, it is definitely a long-term kind of an association. It's a long-time kind of a project. But nevertheless, I think we've made a very good beginning, and thanks to Praful and Save the Hills that we are here. Thank you all very much for listening very patiently. I think David was getting a little tired at the end of it all, but I thank him for his patience and for his delivery. Thank you all.
I just want to
say a word of sincere thanks to Capel and the Save the Hills team for the generous hospitality. The warm welcome of the people that we have met has been overwhelming, really overwhelming. But to the extent that the logistical support we've had on the ground has been magnificent. And without that, it's that type of partnership that will make projects like this give us the opportunity to have some success. So I just want to acknowledge and thank Clifford and the rest of the Save the Hills team, and let us go forward with that partnership in mind. Thank you so much.
May I reciprocate by thanking Professor Chen. We talked on YouTube, on Skype several times before, and I was wondering what kind of thing am I getting into, because I never handled such a mixed bag of highly qualified professionals ever. So I'm really quite scared, but it's been wonderful to meet you. Thank you so much, and we look forward to, as you said, a long-term interaction. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. Honorable MB, for coming up.